Yogtze, le mystère irrésolu le plus étrange d'Allemagne, voilà. Jamais entendu parler de ce truc. J'ai aucune idée de ce que c'est. Pom, 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 pom.
On the night of October the 25th, 1984, Gunther Stoll, a 34-year-old unemployed food engineer from Arnshausen in West Germany, was quietly sitting in his chair at home when out of the blue, he rose to his feet and proclaimed,
Jetzt get me ein Licht auf.
He quickly grabbed the nearest piece of paper
Eureka,
and
quoi.
scribbled down a 6-character word, Yogtze, before he immediately crossed it out in a blind panic and left. Stoll's wife watched on as he shut the front door behind him, got in his car,
Non mais il a fait un AVC,
and drove
hein.
away into the darkness at 11 p.m. This hadn't been the first time Stoll's wife had witnessed strange behaviour from her husband, who had been suffering in recent times from a moderate case of paranoia. He had occasionally been warning her of them, an unknown and unspecified amount of people who he claimed were out to harm him and wanted him dead. But it's unclear whether or not she believed this to be true, or if she put it down to Stoll's mental state. Whilst his wife sat at home perplexed by the meaning of this mysterious new note, Stoll had driven to his nearby favourite pub in Wilnsdorf, where he would order a beer and sit at the bar. After taking merely one sip of the drink, Stoll fell to the floor in a heap, landing on his face and injuring himself. Witnesses at the pub later insisted that Stoll was in no way intoxicated or drunk, but that he seemed to suddenly lose consciousness after looking distressed and anxious.
Mais c'est ça, hein. En fait il était en train de faire un AVC, un truc dans le genre.
Stoll slowly picked himself up off the floor before leaving the pub alone, getting back into his car and driving off once more. Approximately 2 hours later, at about 1 a.m, Stoll had stopped by the nearby town of Hagelsilbach, where he grew up. Turned up to the house of an elderly woman whom he knew from his childhood. Refusing to open the door to him and demanding he go home, the woman claimed that Stoll was worried for his safety, claiming that horrible incidents would take place tonight. Stoll would soon leave as requested, but his last reported words would soon become much more than just paranoid speculation.
Mais c'est bizarre qu'il fasse autant de choses en faisant un AVC par contre. Qu'il ait le temps de faire autant de choses.
At 3 a.m, 2 truck drivers were driving along the Autobahn 45, roughly 60 miles from Hagelsilbach, when they noticed the wreck of a small blue Volkswagen Golf collapsed in a trench on the side of the road. As they parked their vehicles onto the hard shoulder, both men claimed they saw a person in a white jacket with what appeared to be blood on his arm, limping around the Volkswagen before quickly losing sight, never to be seen again. As one driver raced for the roadside emergency phone, the other ran to the vehicle and inspected inside. What he found was Stoll sprawled out in the passenger seat, lying naked.
Putain, comment il s'est retrouvé nu entre le moment où il a quitté la meuf là-bas et maintenant?
It's reported that one of Stoll's arms was so badly injured that it was practically amputated.
Ah ouais.
As the truck driver came to his aid, Stoll found the strength to speak.
Ah mais il est pas mort.
Explaining that there had been 4 other male passengers in the car with him just moments earlier who had fled the scene, insisting that none of them were his friends. An ambulance would soon arrive to treat Stoll for his numerous injuries, yet despite their best efforts, he would unfortunately die on the way to the hospital.
Ça doit pas être un AVC du coup. Peut-être, je sais pas, un cas de démence subite ou un truc dans le genre de... Un truc de genre... Parce que je sais que c'est possible ce genre de truc. De gens qui d'un seul coup, en fait, qui avaient des prédispositions à, genre, à la schizophrénie ou ce genre de choses. Et puis un jour, tu sais pas pourquoi, d'un seul coup, le truc explose et il sombre en gros dans la folie, quoi. La folie, la démence, ce genre de truc. Enfin, folie, démence, c'est de la schizophrénie, quoi. C'est juste que ils perdent pied avec la réalité du jour au lendemain, quoi, en gros.
The circumstances surrounding Stoll's death were already extremely suspicious, yet police investigations led to even more questions and perplexities. Their findings showed that Stoll didn't obtain his injuries by crashing in his Volkswagen, but instead had been run over elsewhere by a different car in a different location before being repositioned back into his
Ok,
Volkswagen.
c'est trop bizarre.
His car keys were found on the rear shelf of the car. His shoes were in the footwell of the driver's seat.
Je commence à comprendre pourquoi c'est le mystère irrésolu le plus étrange
What had even happened to his
d'Allemagne.
clothing? Other drivers who came forward claimed to have seen a hitchhiker trying to obtain a lift from cars turning off near the Hagensud exit, close to where Stoll's car was found. The whereabouts of this man remains unknown, as does that of the man in the white jacket and the alleged 4 men in the Volkswagen. Many theories on what happened to Stoll during the night of the 25th of October have been widely debated, and speculations continue on whether the mysterious note left behind just hours earlier has any significance to solving the case. The only thing that police seem to be certain
Oh, ça, je pense que ça a
is
rien à
that
voir.
Gunther was hit by another vehicle whilst he was naked.
Je pense que c'est genre un truc vraiment où genre le gars a tapé vraiment ce que je disais avant, genre d'un seul coup il a perdu pied avec la réalité, il a écrit un truc qui avait aucun sens, il s'est barré, il allait faire un paquet de trucs qui avaient aucun sens, et pendant qu'il faisait ça, il s'est fait shooter par une bagnole, et je sais pas, les mecs l'ont remis dans sa voiture quoi. C'est ce qui me paraît le plus probable quoi.
And potentially 3 main possibilities on the cause of his death. The first is that Stoll was murdered and placed back into his car to stage the scene as an accident, either by the 4 men he claimed were in the vehicle with him, or by somebody else.
Ok.
The fact that Stoll had previously spoken about them trying to murder him in the days leading up to his death gives credence to this theory, and suggests that he really did have reason to believe his life was in danger, and it wasn't just paranoid schizophrenia. The second is that he was involved
Ouais,
in
un
some sort
concours
of
de
accident,
circonstances, voilà.
possibly a hit and run whilst on the motorway.
Ouais.
Perhaps he initially crashed his car into the roadside, got out to look for help,
Ah.
and stumbled onto
Ah oui.
oncoming traffic. With the driver,
Ouais, voilà.
plus potentially 3 other passengers, perhaps worried that they may be charged for the accidental manslaughter of Stoll.
Voilà, ça c'est
They
ma théorie
quickly carried his
complètement
body
ça.
back into his
C'est ce que
car
je trouve le plus
to
logique.
make it look as
Le
though
plus
his
probable.
injuries were obtained from the initial crash. Neither theory, however, can
Ah
explain
putain,
what
les
Stoll
vêtements,
felt
j'avoue,
like.
merde, j'ai pas pris en compte les vêtements, fait chier. Eh ben, peut-être qu'un des mecs a laissé de l'ADN sur ses vêtements, ou s'est rendu compte, ou ils se sont dit qu'ils allaient foutre de l'ADN sur ses vêtements, et ils ont retiré ses vêtements. Ou alors, du coup, non. Lui, comme il était dans un épisode schizophrénique, il a retiré ses fringues, en fait. Il a retiré ses fringues lui-même, en fait. Avant de se faire shooter sur la route.
During the incident. A third
Possible.
theory suggests that Stoll attempted to take his own life, rushing out onto the autobahn to get hit by another vehicle in a distressed state. Due to the frustrating
Ouais,
lack of
mais un véhicule
evidence
qui
on
s'arrête
how
pas,
Gunther Stoll met his
bizarre.
unfortunate fate that night in October, the significance of the
Ah,
note
quoique
he left
non.
behind,
Hit and run. Je
hours
pars.
prior to his death, have become a matter of public debate. While some believe it was the nonsensical ramblings of a man in an incoherent state, others believe it holds a vital.
Le coup du hit and run, quand même, rien à voir avec ça, du coup. Mais moi, j'y réfléchis, je me dis, mais si je shoot quelqu'un comme ça en pleine nuit sur une, genre sur une 4 voies, dans le genre, est-ce que je m'arrête ou pas? Mais en fait, je crois que la vraie question, c'est est-ce que je pourrais vivre en sachant que potentiellement j'ai tué quelqu'un et que je sais pas s'il est mort. J'ai pas vu j'ai pas vu de nouvelles à ce sujet, donc je sais pas s'il est mort. Est-ce que je pourrais passer ma vie entière sans savoir? Du coup, il y a moyen que je m'arrête. Même si les répercussions elles risquent d'être terribles et tout. Et que je pense que je serais complètement paniqué, mais à mon avis, je m'arrête.
Vital clue into how Gunther Stoll lost his life.
De toute façon, si tu shootes quelqu'un sur la 4 voies et sur l'autoroute, je pense que t'as pas trop le choix de t'arrêter. Hein. De toute façon. Parce que l'impact d'un corps, quand t'es lancé genre à 110 ou 120 ou 130 km/h sur ta bagnole, c'est violent. Hein.
Fact be numbers 0, 6, and 3. And when rewritten this way, it could be interpreted as a 6-digit European car license plate number.
Ah.
Could it be that Gunther was attempting to remember the car license plate of the person who was threatening his life? Maybe even the car which ended up hitting him later that night.
Ok.
What makes this theory even more interesting is the way German number plates work. They use specific letter codes at the beginning of the plate to determine where the car was registered. For example, a license plate beginning with B would indicate it was registered in Berlin, whilst M would indicate Munich. Some codes are exclusively used for official registrations
voilà, ça t'expose ta caisse,
of importance. And interestingly, Y number plates indicate that a vehicle is registered to the German armed forces. Searching every potential combination of the license plate yields no results, though if it is a military vehicle, it could be that it's intentionally being hidden from public records.
Ouais, là encore, on va encore chercher trop loin. Hein. La théorie du rasoir d'Occam, hein. La solution la plus simple, c'est l'explication la plus simple. Hein. Enfin, l'explication la plus simple à un problème, ou à un mystère, c'est généralement l'explication à ce mystère, quoi.
Dismissed as to having little to no relevance to the case, such as the phrase Y06TZE being the call sign of a Romanian radio station. Or that when
Bon, pour le coup, là, je pense que l'explication la plus simple dans ce cas-là, c'est sûrement qu'il s'est auto-infligé tout ça. Hein.
It creates what appears to be coordinates to a small Hawaiian island and an area deep in the Arctic.
Ouais, d'accord.
However, there are two other interesting theories which center around Stoll's profession as a food engineer and his possible connection with the food industry. The first is that the word Yogtze can be split into two, with Yog referring to yogurt and TZE being a code used for a type of artificial flavouring, although there's very little information about what food ingredient TZE is supposed to be. The second is that the word itself is an anagram of zygote. The first stage in the development.
Non mais là on est trop loin dans la théorie du complot par contre. Et si tu changes les lettres, ça donne un autre mot.
In food production. What if Stoll perhaps knew of a project which involved genetically modifying a form of food, but that it may have been done with nefarious intentions? Perhaps he investigated the cause and knew too much, putting his life in danger. The people behind these experiments may have tracked and monitored his movements. Maybe he wrote down a cryptic message to share this news.
Personne l'a compris malheureusement.
It might lead to unwanted attention for his wife. So scribbled it out, leaving the home, fearing he would be putting her in danger by staying indoors. He may have seen someone at the pub that caused him to react and fall over. With nobody to turn to, he visited an old friend from a previous time and begged for their help, only to be turned away despite desperate pleas.
Ouais, ça part dans les arbres sérieusement là.
Perhaps he was kidnapped by 4 men who were part of this clandestine project, stripped naked.
Ça c'est vraiment la théorie du complot de l'enfer là. Je trouvais que ma théorie de lui qui fait une crise schizophrénique, qui se fait shooter par une voiture et qui se retrouve au final dans sa caisse après, qu'il a été envoyé là, qu'il a été mis dans sa caisse par d'autres gens ou que ce soit lui qui se soit traîné dans sa caisse, les deux marchent, mais au moins c'est quand même un peu probable parce que là la théorie du complot de l'enfer, de lui qui a découvert un complot énorme sur la nourriture, enfin ça va beaucoup trop loin.
I personally believe it's more likely that Stoll, in a delusional state, had stripped off and disposed of his clothes prior to crashing his car into the trench on the autobahn. Desperate for help, he ran out onto oncoming traffic and got hit by another driver, who either fled the scene or carried Stoll with 3 other passengers' help back into his Volkswagen to make the whole
Mais elle était marrante la théorie d'avant.
Before disappearing and never speaking of the incident again.
Anschließende Gedanken.
No matter what happened that night to Gunther Stoll, the case of his unfortunate death has become one of Germany's greatest mysteries, and the true meaning of Yogtze may never see the light of day. Whether he became the target of a malicious and evil assault, or was purely a victim of his own personal struggles, the tragedy of Gunther Stoll and the mystery of Yogtze will likely
Oh bah
remain
ouais, je pense que
forever
personne trouvera
unknown.
jamais... Parce que la solution est beaucoup trop simple pour qu'on puisse la prouver, quoi. C'est que vraiment, juste le mec a tapé un délire paranoïaque ou schizophrénique, et puis il est parti en couille, quoi. Mais c'est trop marrant comment vraiment il va deep dans la théorie du complot, mais en restant giga sérieux. Et il s'enfonce, il s'enfonce, il s'enfonce dans le truc, quoi. Et plus il s'enfonce, plus tu te dis, oula, on va loin là quand même. Ah, c'était marrant, putain. N'hésitez pas à aller mettre un like à la vidéo. Putain, je me demande s'il a fait. Il a l'air d'avoir fait d'autres vidéos sur le même genre de truc. Qu'est-ce qu'il fait sur sa chaîne en général? Le jour où un homme a volé un tank. Ouais, il fait des trucs sur des mystères et tout, un peu quoi. Sur des histoires mystérieuses, sûrement, ou un peu what the fuck. Putain, il sort pas beaucoup de vidéos, la vache. Il a presque sorti moins de vidéos que moi cette année sur ma chaîne principale. C'est terrible. Terrible pour lui. Enfin bref.